So welcome back, and I think we can say a very warm good morning to most people in the Americas. Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to the session number 4 already, Making Insurance Work for Women. And I would like to welcome Sarah Ibrahimi, Women's Insurance Program Officer from the ICII United States, and also Catherine, welcome back, Executive Director from the Microinsurance Network in Luxembourg. So while we're waiting for people to log on the session, which also always takes a few minutes, I would like to walk you very quickly through the housekeeping slides. Sorry for those who have already seen that, but just that we have a good session. Please ensure to mute yourself unless you're speaking. We have interpretation available in Spanish at the session, so click at the globe button and then you can choose your language. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the conference website. Please use the Q&A feature to ask questions. So there are 2 ways to communicate. One is the chat, but it's better if you have a question to put it in the Q&A. That is easier for the panelists to answer those questions. And if you have any technical issues, please message the MIN executive team that time in the chat. So thank you very much. Welcome back. And I hand over the microphone to the facilitators of the session.
Great. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to make a few opening remarks and then hand over to Sarah, just in terms of the run of show. After the opening remarks, where I'll be introducing the topic, talking about why it matters, and given over and so on. Sarah will be talking about the global women's insurance opportunity with some key findings from the She for Shield report. And there'll be a brief Q&A after Sarah's discussion about her presentation. Then we'll go on to learn about the journey of AXA Manfred, how and why they've entered the women's market, and some of the key challenges that they faced, and lessons that they've learned that they'd like to share with us. We'll then have a brief Q&A about that presentation before we have a panel discussion with Lisa and Gilles, which I'll be facilitating. At the end of the panel discussion, there'll be some more time for audience Q&A before we wrap up the last session of today, other than at least for this time zone from Central Europe. So let me begin. My colleague Azia will be posting some links in the chat, which you're welcome to look at. I suggest that you copy them so that you have them available if you're interested afterwards. So keep an eye out for that. So 2016 was the year for global goals. And in 2017, the hashtag #MeToo phrase was reintroduced by Alyssa Milana and led to a global social movement that continues to focus on sexual harassment, assault, and bullying. Millions of women have been empowered through this astoundingly successful groundswell. 2018 was the year of the women. 2020, oh yes, we have a video here that we might like to watch if we have some time, but I suggest that for now we just keep going. I would encourage you to watch that video from UN Women. Then in 2020 was the year that marked the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration. In 2005, more than 30,000 activists, representatives from 189 countries, unanimously adopted this vision of equal rights, freedom, and opportunities for women everywhere, no matter what their circumstances. Here's an excerpt from the Beijing Declaration, which you can read in full if you use the link in the chat. We are determined to ensure women's equal access to economic resources, including land, credit, and I underline credit, and financial services, science and technology, vocational training, information, communication, and markets, as a means to further the advancement and empowerment of women and girls, including through the enhancement of their capacities to enjoy the benefits of equal access to these resources inter alia by means of international cooperation. Now, as we know, in the same year, 2020, women around the world suffered significant setbacks. With lockdowns, rates of domestic abuse and violence soared. In the European Union, women made up 76% of the 49 million healthcare workers on the front line of the virus. They also account for 82% of all cashiers and 95% of domestic workers and cleaners, and 93% of childcare workers and teachers' aides. We are disproportionately employed in services sectors that have been the most vulnerable to job losses. Many women work part-time and are informally employed with fewer, if any, labour rights or access to social security and even government health insurance schemes. On top of this, women are far more likely than men to take time off to care for children and relatives. There's another link to the chat for the source of that information, which you're welcome to explore. Now, the Brookings Institute writes that COVID-19 is hard on women because the US economy is hard on women, and this virus excels at taking existing tensions and ratcheting them up. Millions of women were already supporting themselves and their families on meager wages before coronavirus mitigation lockdowns sent unemployment rates skyrocketing and millions of jobs disappeared. And again, the link to that is in the chat. In a nutshell, women in rich countries lose out. In developing countries and emerging markets, women are even worse off. Even before the pandemic, women-owned SMEs faced a $1.5 trillion financing gap. During the pandemic, a worldwide survey of nearly 600 SMEs found that around 90% of the respondents saw a serious drop in sales, and 38% feared they would not be able to pay their employees. On the digital divide, women are 17% less likely to use the internet than men, and that's a figure that rises to 23% in emerging markets. Women are also 20% less likely to have access to a mobile phone, tablet, or computer. That last bit of information, the stats, come from an excellent report that Sarah flagged to me, published by the ICII, and again, the link will be in the chat. Now, the good news is that there is hope. In this session, we're going to hear about some concrete programs that are focused on improving women's access to insurance and the impact that this has had on their lives. Sarah Ibrahimi, who is with us today and co-facilitating the session, is an operations officer with the Women's Insurance Program at the International Finance Corporation. Her team advises insurance companies in emerging markets on how better to serve women as customers and as employees. So Sarah, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think that you set the stage really, really well in opening up the session with not only some really hard-hitting statistics and facts about kind of the state of women globally, but also about COVID, which is, of course, why we're all gathered here virtually today. So a big good morning and good afternoon to everyone that's joining. It's a pleasure to see over 100 participants here today. So Asier, if you would be able to start sharing my slides, we can go ahead and jump right into learning a bit more about the global women's insurance opportunity. Next slide, please. So as Catherine said, I'm a member of the ICII Women's Insurance Program, and we work to enable insurance companies to better target women, both as customers, as part of the distribution force, as well as employees. And similar to everyone attending this webinar today, we were also curious about what is the women's insurance opportunity. So in 2015, ICII embarked on a journey alongside with AXA Group and Accenture to better understand the relationship between insurers and women. And coming out of this was the She4Shield report. And the She4Shield report really looked at how we've seen this growing interest about how there can be a competitive advantage within the insurance industry. And we thought that the report would be really key at looking at two very important questions. Next slide. So the report sought to answer for one question, which is what needs to be done to better target women as decision makers on insurance purchases? And then also, how can we prioritize women to actively participate in the sales force? And so to conduct this, we did research, over 170 interviews across 10 different markets. And those are the markets that you see highlighted on the screen there. And these were interviews with the insurance industry, distribution force, women as customers, regulators, associations, universities, and we also did secondary research on kind of more broad topics about gender and development and banking. And what did we find? Next slide. Well, first and foremost, we found a tremendous opportunity. We found that the 2030 annual premium value of the women's global market is predicted to grow to almost twice the size of what it was in 2013. So increasing up to $1.7 trillion. And of this, over 50% is going to come from emerging markets, like the ones where most of us are working. And these emerging markets, they're expected to account for 6 to 9 times of the growth, reaching almost $900 billion by 2030. ICII, would you kindly share the link to the Schiefer-Shield report in the chat? We want to make sure that everyone can access these the full findings of the report and really dig in to the individual market opportunities. But for today's presentation, I'll be looking a little bit more at what are some of these social and economic factors that are driving the growth. And so in addition to the growth, we also looked at what are some of the different trends and insights about women and their relationship to insurance. Well, first of all, we found that there are 8 key tipping points in the lives of women where they really do need to have additional protection and insurance coverage, which are great opportunities for where insurers can step in. And these are moments such as their marriage, entering the workforce, having their first child, divorce, getting closer to retirement. The report also found that there's an ever-growing number of women entrepreneurs, but they lack access to capital and their risk protection needs are even greater than of their male counterparts. We also found that by targeting women at different life cycles, it can allow insurers to have a competitive advantage through boosting their profits as well as diversifying their portfolios. And lastly, we found that women have a real knack for creating long-term relationships, which can lend itself to having improved client retention, increasing cross-selling and uptake opportunities. So next slide, because before we'd like to go into these insights, I want to talk a little bit about what is driving this market growth. So first and foremost, women have an increasing participation in the opportunity. They are more educated, more of them are getting tertiary education, more of them are working and earning their own incomes, and they're having higher levels of entrepreneurship, resulting in incomes increasing across the board. And so in addition to this increased participation, we also see that they have evolving roles in society that demands more protection. We're seeing that women are delaying marriage. They're also having increased divorce rates, resulting in more single-headed households around the world. And so this increases their need for risk protection. We also saw that women are having longer life expectancies, but there also is a widening of the gender pay gap. So we need to have this extra protection for them and their families. We've also seen that women are more willing to invest in the education and health of their families. And every time that we work with clients at ISC, we hear the same thing, that women are worried about the health of their children and their families. Those are their top priorities. And they also have caretaking responsibilities that go alongside with that worry. So they're more likely to have a larger burden on themselves, which means that they're tending to borrow money from informal sources when an emergency happens. Next slide. So we've seen that the opportunity is huge, but are women valuable clients? Do we want them in our portfolio? Yes, we certainly do. We've seen that as women's economic contributions to their households increase, they're gaining bargaining and spending power, and they're willing to spend more on insurance because it's shown that women, they spend differently because they focus their dollars on improving and protecting the household welfare. So not only are women making the financial decisions, but they're heading more households than before, hence becoming the decision makers. So in addition, we've seen that women are willing to spend more than men to protect against risks and to have a security and peace of mind. For example, our research showed that women in China, Mexico, and Nigeria, they're willing to spend 20% of their income to protect against future risks versus only 7 to 10% of men in those same markets. However, women are currently only spending 5 to 8% of their income. So there is this gap between the 5 to 8% current and the potential 20%. And we've seen that women also don't purchase insurance just for themselves, but rather they're conduits for spending for the entire family and allowing the entire others within the family to get access to insurance. So women, particularly working mothers, we've seen tend to purchase insurance for their parents, their spouses, their children, hence conduits for the entire family. And we've also seen that women have behaviors that and roles within families that make themselves attractive as clients. There's academic studies that have shown that women are less likely than men to engage in fraudulent claims. And we've also seen that women can be more loyal. For example, there was a study that found that women are 8% less likely than men to change their insurance providers. And in addition to being more loyal, women are also great brand ambassadors. We anecdotally heard once that if a woman has a good experience, she'll tell 10 people. If she has a bad experience, she'll tell her entire community on Facebook. So beware there. We want to keep maintaining a positive relationship with women. Next slide, please. So we know that women do need insurance due to their exposed risk, but what are they currently thinking about the insurance industry? Well, it's not all bad, but it's not all good. For example, we heard from women in Nigeria that they feel that insurers can be old-fashioned, perhaps elitist, and that insurance is only an option for the rich. We've also been told that insurers are untrustworthy, especially when it comes to claim settlement. And we've heard that women sometimes don't even know who their insurance provider is, especially in the case of non-life. They simply purchase based on what is the cheapest and what they need to comply with the minimum legal requirements. So we're going to be digging a little bit later in today in our conversations with Aksa Mansard and Lisa and Gilles about what can be done to improve this. Next slide. When it comes to agents, one thing came out loud and clear. Women want to feel that agents are trusted advisors, not pushy salespeople. They want someone that listens to their concerns, can create customized recommendations, and are not pushing whatever the product of the week is. Personal referrals carry a particularly heavy weight for women, and they prefer to deal with agents that do come recommended by friends or family. And they want to have a personal interaction and get to know an agent firsthand, but are okay using digital for follow-ups. Next slide. Next slide, please. So what is it that women want from insurers? Well, they want more than just products being renamed and sold to them business as usual. We're going to hear excellent examples of this later on today. We also want recognition from their insurers that their needs are different. They have multifaceted roles inside and outside of their home, and so they want to be recognized and have solutions that work for them. They also care about good value. They want things that save them time and money and have tangible benefits. But they also want to be really informed decision makers. They don't want to feel rushed, and they want to be allowed to have an information gathering period that's free from jargon. They also want to feel that insurers can be trusted sources of advice to help them better manage their lives. Next slide. So how can insurers do this? What can be done? Well, there's three key areas that we'd like to focus on. The first is we've heard the expression, you can't improve what you don't measure. Well, it's essential to start by collecting data and to take a baseline to better understand where you are. And this is through doing a gender data disaggregation of your portfolio. Now, every client IFC has worked with has found this to be tremendously insightful and incredibly valuable when they begin actually designing their targeted offerings for women. So as you'll hear from the presentation from Aksa Mansard in Nigeria coming up, as well as in the discussion between Lisa and Gilles, gender disaggregated data has been a critical input that they've used in their businesses to make really strongly informed decisions about the women's market. So, but before designing these solutions and taking decisions about the women's market, we need to develop a targeted value proposition. You need to understand the pain points of women, and this is done through in-depth market research, really paying attention to the nuanced needs of women in various segments. Since women are not a homogeneous group, they really do have different needs based on their life stage. And lastly, of course, you need to go where your customers are. We saw that in increasing the number of sales agents yields great results in terms of being able to attract women customers, but you also need to incorporate digital tools as well as build partnerships. So right now, ICII is going to share some links to case studies in the chat. These are 4 excellent case studies that we invite you to take the time to read, because they really do go in depth, giving examples of each of these different key areas of how insurers really can make targeted solutions. Next slide, please. So I mentioned gender disaggregated data and how it really is a powerful tool and an essential first step to being able to better serve customers. And we want to just take a minute to talk about how it's different than other types of data collection. Now, sometimes people hear gender data and they might think about market research, but what we're really talking about here is doing a diagnosis, a disaggregation of who is in your portfolio. So really zooming in on what and who and how much and where women are currently buying your products. So at the beginning of every client engagement that the Women's Insurance Program team does at IFC is we work with insurance companies to complete this gender data diagnostic. And this is often the first time that insurers have ever analyzed their portfolios in this way. It's very common that until they're forced to sit down and complete the diagnostic, they haven't thought about it. So we're hoping that through getting the conversation sparked through conferences and events like this, that we'll be able to see more and more of the industry proactively taking this approach. Now, this can be sometimes quite a cumbersome or manual process. So sometimes there is data still being collected on handwritten forms. It requires collaboration across different departments, and of course, identifying where those gaps may exist. However, after completing the diagnostic, the data really does provide a full picture of which products women are buying, where women might be spending more than men in certain product lines. This allows an opportunity to start thinking about cross-selling, or where we should be increasing spend, or which channels might be more effective. And also, if you're looking at demographic data, such as marital status, their age, employment, where they're located, where they bought their products, this also really allows insurers to analyze these cross sections and make even more valuable decisions. So in addition to drawing out these insights around purchasing patterns that can inform the sales and marketing team, it can also really allow you to quantify the value of your female customer base. And then in turn, this allows you to continue to build the business case around the women's market opportunity through really quantifying it, having targets set, and then monitoring that growth, which is what we hear some examples of later. Next slide. However, the reason why we're gathered virtually today is, of course, the elephant in the room, COVID-19. How is this affecting women? We know that the economic effect of the pandemic has been devastating. And as Catherine suggested, there is emerging evidence that is showing that it's had a disproportionate impact on women compared with men. So as we know, women were already less likely to have access to financial services, and there's disproportionate employment in the informal sector, meaning that they have less formal access to insurance. There was a link in the chat shared earlier to the COVID-19 guidance note, which you see on the screen here. If that would be able to get shared again, just to remind people and have it fresh there. But women are a critical element of the insurance industry. And so as IFC saw through its Cheaper Shield research, insurers and others in the industry, if we're not proactively thinking about women, will most likely end up making decisions that do not serve and support them. So we began to see early evidence that women were being impacted by COVID-19 disproportionately due to their roles as caregivers, as well as working primarily in the informal sector. So we sought to look at what can we do to support the recovery across the industry. We noticed that there were some trends towards digital due to the lockdowns and social distancing measures, and we wanted to be able to provide some guidance in terms of what to do. So the note focused on 4 key angles. And we weren't able to tackle everything, but we did want to pick out 4 key areas. So we looked at how developing and deploying a digital strategy needs to be customized, bearing in mind women and their preferences. We also saw that how insurers can appear and engage with women is incredibly important, especially during a time of information overload and confusion. We've looked at product innovation and how it absolutely is an opportunity to serve segments better. And we also saw that reaching women customers, especially during a pandemic where lockdowns are putting traditional methods unavailable, we needed to have some out-of-the-box thinking. So next slide, please. What did we find? Well, the note was published in June 2020 when COVID was still very much unknown. And here we are about a year and a half later, and much of what we've seen still is standing true. So as many of you can relate to, during the peak of the lockdowns, people were driving a lot less, but since then levels have returned more to normal. There was an increased demand in health cover, not surprisingly, and there were increased searches for health insurance online. And there's been a lot of interesting innovations in this area that I'm sure we'll hear about throughout the conference. The guidance note also speaks to how insurers can go the extra mile to support customers and agents during this time. We saw it as really encouraging to see this use of digital tools as a way to have increased outreach. And this guidance note provides some documentation of some really great examples of how insurers can do this. So shifting gears slightly and thinking about women as employees and their needs, we saw that we're all being forced to work in different ways. Some of us are remote for the first time after never having had the opportunity to, but we've seen that there have been some really great innovations and that some of these actually are favorable to women having more flexibilities with regards to their work policies. And this is a bright spot for the insurance industry, that where we can actually attract more women and working parents to the insurance industry if we maintain some of these innovations. However, not everything has gone smoothly with regards to COVID, as we know. And one area we observed this was in areas of business interruption. And this was largely due to misinformation, confusion, some legal challenges around what's covered and what's not. And this just highlights that there's absolutely more that can and should be done in protecting businesses, especially in the face of pandemics like COVID-19. Next slide. So I really thank everyone for your time and attention. I know that we covered a lot of material in a very short time. And now I welcome question and answers. So I saw that there's two that came in through the chat here. So one is making reference to, from Mark Robertson, says, I know some insurers, not Marker Insurance, who design products for women exclusively, for example, First for Women in South Africa. Correct. We actually have a case study on First for Women that was shared in the chat, so I encourage everyone to look at that. Are there any examples of micro insurers taking this approach in targeting for women? Yes, we actually have some examples that we'll be sharing, and actually a conversation today with Women's World Banking will actually be, Gilles will be sharing some of the examples of the partnerships that Women World Banking have made with different microinsurance institutions to be able to create these solutions. So I will save that for the upcoming conversation. Emily Coleman asks, do you have any findings on specific products or combination of products, particularly anything on agriculture? So agriculture is one of the areas that remains sort of an uncracked nut, so to speak, because women have very important roles within the agriculture value chain. However, agriculture insurance has remained one of these areas where the insurance clients that IOC has worked with to date, we have not designed an agri-specific product. However, I can say that there is work and research that's being done between the IFC and the Global Index Insurance Facility that's working on creating kind of risk profiles of women in key different markets to specifically look at the risk needs and preferences of women that are working in our smallholder farmers as well as agribusiness SME owners. So that's something that you can look for coming out next year, where we will specifically be looking at the needs of women in agriculture so that there can be more knowledge across the market. And one last question before we pass over the time. I saw that Sanduisi is asking, is there any data or frameworks to measure affordability of insurance products for women? I know that the ILO Impact Insurance Facility has quite a bit around frameworks for affordability and product design. So I would refer you to look at the Impact Insurance Facility to see what tools are available there. So with that, sticking to time, I am very, very, very pleased to introduce Oyinkan Adewunmi, who is joining us from AXA Mansard. AXA Mansard is one of the shining stars of an example of a women's insurance program. They were born out of the She for Shield report as being one of the countries that was not only looked at in depth in the She for Shield report, but also was one of the very first pilots to see what does this really look and feel like on the ground. So we've just crossed the 5-year mark of the launch of the Women's Insurance Program in Nigeria, along with AXA Mansard. So without further ado, over to you, Oyinka. I know you have so much to share with the audience and really looking forward to great engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can see my screen. Can you confirm, please? Okay, great. Good afternoon once again. My name is Oyinkan. I work with AXA Mansard in Lagos, Nigeria. I'll be taking you through our She for Shield program and what we did as an organization to penetrate the women's market. So we'll look at how we started, the journey so far, how data played a vital role for us, and our plans for the future. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned earlier, in 2015, AXA Group and IFC co-published the She for Shield Insure Women to Better Protect All report. It highlighted the largely untapped women insurance market and this 1.7 trillion opportunity. And based on this, pilots were kicked off in India and Nigeria, which is AXA Mansard, in October 2016, with the following goals. To make AXA Mansard the preferred insurance among women in Nigeria. We wanted to partner with women and provide them with solutions that address their specific needs. We wanted to start with focusing on entrepreneurship, as the report exposed a gap in terms of insurance services available to women entrepreneurs. So the focus was to develop solutions that would enhance and protect women businesses, and then we would expand to health and other insurance needs. We had 6 strategic pillars which we were aiming to hack. We wanted to change women's insurance attitudes and behaviors towards insurance. We wanted them to see the importance of insurance, to partner with them, and for them to see us as their partners. We also wanted to develop a gender-sensitive distribution model and to become the women's employer of choice. Okay, so what did we do? We began by analyzing our internal data. As Sarah mentioned, this was a very challenging experience because this wasn't something that we were doing beforehand. So it was important for us to do that, to create the foundation which we would be building on. It was vital for us to understand, our customers' buying patterns and the products that our women customers were interested in. So following this, we commissioned a research to better understand the pain points, needs and preferences for women in Nigeria. We focused on 3 segments: entrepreneurs, professionals, and low-income women, and we visited different cities in Nigeria. Key findings from the research was that women across all the segments had a strong desire to be financially independent. Women wanted to be empowered and wanted self-respect within their homes and communities. They sought personal development, education for themselves, and their family members as well, because women are naturally caregivers. So they worried about education for themselves, their health, as well as for their children and their family members. They knew that, if they fell ill and, down on their health, it could hamper their businesses or, how they make their daily living, whether it be a 9-to-5 or, a business, as I mentioned. So following the research, we were able to identify customer segments, like I mentioned, and this empowered us to prefer solutions, which we then offered to our women customers. We launched the She initiative following this. She stands for Superhero every day because women are superheroes. And following this, we repositioned a product which was our AutoFlex to She Drive. We wanted to make women more comfortable with buying, car insurance, and that was what we initially started with. We kicked off the gender sensitivity trainings in July for project team members, our advisors, and senior management staff. We wanted to ensure that, even internally, stakeholders were aware and duly equipped on the journey we were about to embark on. The trainings exposed and addressed the unconscious bias which, advisors had towards prospecting women and gave them a better understanding on how to approach female prospects. Women want to partner with whoever is providing them with a product or service. And that is what we started. We started training our advisors to be. We started training them to be partners so that they'll be equipped to be there for their customers, even bringing them solutions outside, insurance. Because women really, we can call our insurance provider for anything, and they want to know that we're there through whatever it is. So we had those trainings, and this is something we did, company-wide. Next, as I mentioned before, following, the research, we met and partnered with different financial institutions and non-profit organizations with similar goals. And we partnered with institutions that wanted to see women being empowered, women being, out there, and women making successes. We sponsored and presented at different events, such as Lagos Moms, the SME 100, the WIMBIS program. WIMBIS is a really big women empowerment forum in Nigeria. And we participated in these events to create awareness and share the importance of insurance. And we also ensured that we invited our women customers to these events to create networking opportunities for them through which they could introduce their businesses to others and, invariably expand their customer base. Finally, like I mentioned, we launched the She Initiative. We did this at the WIMBIS conference in 2017. The conference was attended by over 1,500 women. Everything we do as a company for women is anchored under the She Initiative. We also had a video which we played at the conference, and then we ran these videos across all our welcome centers in Nigeria so that the public would be aware of this new initiative that we were launching. We then launched the AXA Mansard Women's Network. They say charity begins at home, so it was important for us to have a network in-house which fostered community where all AXA Mansard women could thrive through career development by way of coaching, mentoring, and other engagement activities. We made sure to include our male colleagues so that everyone was carried along, and then we work better as an organization. Finally, this year we launched the She is in Charge webinar. This is a platform that is targeted at upwardly mobile women. The webinar targets various topics of interest to business and career women, where facilitators share personal stories and tips on different topics. We've had 3 episodes so far this year, including personal branding for women and starting and growing your business in Nigeria. So what we've done so far is come up with, do some internal cleaning, come up with different ideas, which we then would take and then launch a product in the near future. Right now, we are still, partnering with women, driving women conversations however way we can. So like I mentioned, data was really, really important to us because, we couldn't have gone far without it. The research and insights that we gathered allowed us to discover and hear what women's risks were, what women, really wanted, were based on our data cleaning, and, we were able to ascertain our benchmark, and then we commenced consistently tracking the impact of our initiatives. And this is evident, in our results. We have seen a huge improvement since we started in 2016. And the baseline when we started in 2016, we were at 19,450 women customers. The target was to get to 60,000 by 2020. We are not there yet. However, we are now at close to 50,000 women customers. we can also see on the screen that the percentage of female customers compared to the male customers was at 32% compared to 68% for male customers. Now we're at 50-50. So what data helped us to do was to dimension our portfolio. It allowed us to take a closer look at the women customer numbers and the men customer numbers. So this drove us to develop ideas geared towards presenting our products as more women friendly. We repositioned some of our products to attract women. We attended events and sponsorship where we took news about insurance products and our services just to bring more women on board. And standardized reporting has also helped us to ensure that we continue to work towards delivering these goals, because it is important that as we have started, we continue and sustain the momentum. Also, the results showing, we can see that based on our GWP target, we have surpassed this. The target was to be at $8.3 million by the end of 2020. We were at $9.4 million at the end of 2020. So the result shows that what we have done has really impacted our portfolio. It shows that we put in the work, and since we are keeping at it, we are bringing more women into the portfolio, we are selling to more women, and our portfolio is basically growing. The great thing about the women's market, like Sarah mentioned, is that once a service provider is able to either meet or surpass a woman's expectation, such a provider earns their trust, and then they spread the word. And even once anyone in their network requires that service, the recommendation of that specific provider is almost automatic. So that's what we've done. We've tried to become partners to these women so that once a need arises within their network, we're the insurer of choice. So for the future, what do we have to do to continue and sustain this momentum and guarantee success? Our partnerships are very important to us. We must deepen existing relationships. We have to be more present and do more with our partners. We plan to sign on new partnerships with organizations who are driving women empowerment. We have, a few in Nigeria. Like Sarah mentioned, insurance penetration in Nigeria is quite low at the moment, especially within women. So when we partner with these organizations, we have the opportunity to go to their events, go to their communities to speak about insurance to these women. Sometimes we even recruit from them as well. So the plan is to partner with these organizations to continue to drive the message. The second thing we must do is to implement and roll out CVP2. Like I mentioned, we have the ideas, we have the different products, and we have the needs that need to be taken care of. So these are things that we need to roll out. We need to roll out products specifically targeted at the women's market and introduce more riders to products which address women's needs and concerns. We need to go to our regulator, get approval, and roll out this product. We must carry on our gender sensitivity trainings. In fact, these trainings have really helped the way our advisors speak to women customers or their prospects. It has even helped in-house how we relate with one another as colleagues, right? So we must hold refresher trainings and include as part of our induction for new recruits. Our advisors must be trained on this, and they must earn their customers' trust. The importance of data cannot be overemphasized. It's really helped us. We have to continue our regular reviews and analysis, track and monitor performance, and use those insights to address any highlighted patterns or trends that we see in our portfolio. Finally, we must understand that this is a continuous cycle. We have to keep innovating and making good use of our data. When we are able to utilize the insight that we gather from this data, we'll be able to come up with ideas to create solutions. Once we create the solutions, we must test them. We'll take the learnings and then refine based on our findings. Whatever does not work, we refine it so that it works, or we create something new. We must be open to evolving, and this will help us deploy exciting and interesting solutions that the women's market will find attractive. So thank you very much. And these are my contact details if you have any questions, but I'll take the
Thank you so much, Yinka. And I think that we lost you a little bit for the very tail end of the thank you slide. But other than that, we heard you perfectly loud and clear. I think that the example of AXA Mansard is such a... Do you want to unmute just to, did you want to say anything else, Yinka? You're back on mute. You're okay now. Okay. Yeah, so the example of AXA Mansard is such an important one because they've been at this for 5 years now. They have such a wealth of experience in terms of how they started from scratch. As Yinka said at the very beginning, they were not doing anything for women in particular, and that their journey in particular with the data collection and kind of, as she said, quite painful, but look at how they've grown. I think that the results slide, not only with information that's listed, but the additional kind of data points that Yinka shared is tremendous, especially given the fact that AXA Mansard has indeed not launched new solutions to the market for women, but rather they have done all of this through the partnerships and retraining their advisory sales force and really being able to become a trusted partner of women. So I see that there's one question that came through in the chat here from Mary Ann asking about insurance products that were tailored to women's risk exposure. Yinka, do you want to speak a little bit in terms of kind of what kind of happened with the actual design and launch of new women's solutions? Because I know AXA Group, Lisa, will be able to share about the group as a whole, but I don't know if you want to give a little bit of insight in terms of how and why AXA Mansard has not necessarily taken the launching new solutions approach to their women's market.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. For the products launch, this is something that we have in view. However, there were some to launch a product, we need to get regulatory approval. So we've had hiccups with regulatory approval. So rather than waiting till we get these approvals, we decided to reposition some of our products. We had a product called the AutoFlex, which was a variant of our vehicle insurance. So we repositioned it to attract women. And women are generally better drivers, or should I say more careful drivers, right? No offense to women. So we repositioned this product to be more attractive to women. So that's some of the things that we do. Also on our marketing materials, we make sure our marketing materials appeal to women rather than only just men. So we use creatives that will draw the woman in. So we have a business insurance plan for SMEs right now, which we're targeting at women because we know we have a lot of women SMEs in Nigeria. So our marketing materials, our adverts are really tailored to attract these women so that we can bring them into our portfolio.
Thank you, Yinka. And I think it's like loud and clear coming through. The answer is not always redesign a new solution from scratch, but rather a women's market approach is so much more diverse than just market research, launch a product and see what happens. But rather AXA Mansard is the kind of the prime example of how much growth can be truly achieved through targeted marketing, excellent partnerships, building trust with the women's market. There was one impactful quote that I think came out in a conference last year, which we both participated, where AXA Mansard said, there is not one important women's event in Nigeria where AXA Mansard is not there. They are always there, being side by side with women showing that they're supportive and interested in the causes that are important to women. So bravo, hats off to those efforts, and for showing that and telling that story of, it's not about what solutions you're launching, but rather it's what can be done with what's already there. So thank you. Catherine, I know that you had a question. Over to you.
Yes, I did. And actually, it's more a question as a confused consumer than as the moderator or my kind of day job. So I've been buying insurance for more than 35 years, all right? And every single insurance form that I've had to fill out has asked me whether I am male or female. And today there may be some other categories, options that you could tick. And it's also asked, for example, in the case of life insurance, who the beneficiaries are and the gender of those beneficiaries. So I have 2 sons, so I always put down my 2 sons. So what I don't understand is, if I have been providing all of this information all of these years, even when it's insurance for a car, right? What are the insurers, why are they asking it, and what are they doing with that information if they're not using it to understand their client base?
That is a great question. That is often, so I can answer from the perspective of IFC and what we've seen. What we've seen is, just because something's on a form doesn't mean it's necessarily, input into a mandatory field in the system, let's say, or that anything is being done with it beyond underwriting purposes. And this is where sometimes our work with clients is to work across the different divisions to figure out which teams or which departments are housing certain line items in those customer information forms, and actually getting them to be compiled all together so that we're looking at the information in a cohesive manner. And I think I see Lisa here in the chat. Hi, Lisa. She's saying, from an actuarial point of view, gender is used as a rating factor. So sometimes the case is that it's sitting with the actuaries. I see Lisa nodding her head as well. I don't know if you want to chime in to share kind of, I know ICII Group will be sharing their journey about data and how it's been used, but from the client, from what we've seen with our clients, is sometimes these are paper forms or information that's sitting with an insurance agent that is so busy that they're typing in the bare minimum into the system, and by no fault of their own, they're working commission based. We empathize with it, but in order to start making progress, they do need to be incentivized to be providing that information so that the appropriate departments can actually use it for informed business decisions. So Lisa, I don't know if you want to comment on it, or Yinka add anything at this point, but we are just 1 minute away from transitioning into the vibrant discussion between ICII Group and Gilles. So it might be a perfect time to leave that as food for thought to pick up in your conversation with Catherine. Oyinka, deepest gratitude for sharing so much information and the journey of AXA Mansard. I hope that everyone is inspired from your presentation, and absolutely also does revisit the case study that was shared in the chat, because there is a case study about the journey of AXA Mansard for those that are interested in gathering more insights around what is the Nigerian women's insurance market like, what are the risk profiles of Nigerian women, how are they different, and how did AXA Mansard go ahead and tailor their women's insurance program based on those specific needs and profiles. So over to you, Catherine. I know you're going to moderate a really great session, and thank you everyone for your great questions and feedback in the chat.
Great, and thanks for the really fantastic presentation. So interesting and also inspiring. So thanks so much for that. So Lisa, we've heard a lot about AXA's partnership on the ground just now. And you hold a dual role at group level in Paris, where you're head of women's market and you're global head of ESG business. What's the link between the two roles?
Yes, so hello. So thank you very much for inviting me today. So indeed, so at ACSA, we have created a specific team in charge of identifying business opportunities on ESG topics, so environmental, social, and governance. And the Women Initiative it's within this team. And it's about how can we develop products and services for women clients. And so we heard the examples of Nigeria, but we have also in other countries, so both mature and emerging, and I will be glad sharing with you later on.
Great, thank you. And Gilles, you're Global Head of Insurance at Women's World Banking. And I wonder if you could tell us briefly about why Women's World Banking exists, how you work, and also your approach to making insurance work for women. Over to you, Gilles.
Thanks, Catherine. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for organizing this conference and making women in insurance a specific topic. I'm the only man on this panel, but I think the problem that we're trying to solve is not going to be solved if men just sit on their seats and not do anything and twiddle thumbs. We all need to solve it together. I think we heard some numbers that make clear why we need to address this segment. So Women's World Banking is an NGO. We were officially incorporated in 1979, but the idea was actually conceived during the first UN World Conference on women in Mexico as early as 1975, based on the idea that economic independence can reinforce women's rights and enable them to make choices as well as affects their education, opportunity, and well-being. And I think it's quite interesting that 40 years later, gender equality is a full part of the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a growing body of evidence of strong positive links between women economic empowerment and health outcomes for the family and improved economics. But, and there's a big but, the gender parity is far from being achieved. If you take the numbers from the latest Findex, there's still a persisting absolute gender gap in developing economies of 9%. So the question maybe is not why Women's World Banking exists, but rather why do we still exist? So we are a network of 55 institutions. We work in 28, 30 countries, goes up and down all the time. And we basically work in three things that all work together towards having more financial inclusion for women. We do advisory services, so we work with financial institutions developing product. We have an investment fund that has a gender lens, one of the earliest in that field, and we work on leadership and gender diversity. And as far as insurance is concerned, we started our journey 15 years ago, and we focus mainly on commercial life and health solutions. And our approach is based on the combination of two facts. On the one hand, and I think there's a recent number coming from Swiss Re Institute, the biggest insurance gap is in health protection. That's the health protection gap, and it's reached a new high of $588 billion US. This is the biggest gap compared to any other gap, by the way, also climate change or natural disasters. The second fact, and I think someone mentioned that before, is that all our body research shows that women tend to be the caregivers in all regions. We did research, health emergencies always came up at the top 3 of all the financial pain points. So that's in a few words why we're here and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. That's really comprehensive and I think very helpful for participants who may not be familiar with Women's World Banking. So now a question for both of you, right? And I'll start with Lisa and then move over to you, Gilles. Now, women and girls obviously make up almost half the world's population. We live in different cultures. We belong to different income groups. We belong to different religions and ethnicities. Are there really common factors between women who belong to such very different segments?
Yes, so thank you for the question. At ACSA, what we saw is that with the creation of the Women in Insurance initiative, I think that the first priority for us was to collect insights from the ground across our different geographies. Oya was one of the examples of what we did in Nigeria, but it was not just the only market. And what was interesting for us is that we saw that there were some commonalities across the economic ladder, geographies, and culture. In terms of key learnings, what we saw is that, first of all, women are more and more the decision makers of their household, not just for insurance coverage, but also for other type of spending. So depending on their economic situation, we can see that education, car, travel are part of these decisions. By 2028, we have seen that it is expected that they will control up to 75% of discretionary spending worldwide, which is also something to take into consideration. The second key learning is that women juggle to balance their personal and professional life. So services to help them manage this type of family management, health management are well appreciated. The third finding, and it's linked to some points that she mentioned, is that women tend to score at medium to low priority when it concerns their health, but at the highest when it concerns their children, their parents, or even their partners. Because of most of the decisions about healthcare are made by women, we call them very often the chief medical officers of their home. And it's very often our first interlocutor when it comes to talking about health. So definitely the part also on caretakers is a reality that we see both on mature and in emerging markets when it comes to women. And finally, when it comes to women entrepreneurs, which has been a topic that we have heard in the different presentations, one key point was health. For instance, women entrepreneurs will score it at the highest because they see the link between their own good health and the performance of their business. So this is interesting to note. And also topics like lack of network, access to finance is a top priority regardless of their culture or geography. With COVID-19, we decided also to nurture a little bit more the knowledge that we had in terms of the effects that COVID-19 could have on women from a health, economic, and digital perspective. And so on health, without any surprise, what we see is that during the crisis, many women have had difficulty accessing healthcare, either for financial reasons, lack of availability, or fear of contracting the virus. And of those with chronic conditions, we see that up to 60% of women have had to postpone their treatment. And we know that this lack of access to routine healthcare could have long-term consequences on their health. It's important also to see that in terms of segment, when we talk about young women or single mothers, they are the most affected. So for single mothers, they had to bear the burden of increased childcare and housework alone, which make them feel very isolated or helpless during the pandemic. On the economic side, we saw that nearly 50% have had to dip into their savings to make ends meet or turn to family or friends for support. And on the digital, so indeed, for the women that had access to digital, it provided a lifeline for many women. So they were using it more to manage their health, their social life, and their children's education. And when it comes to teleconsultation, we saw that 79% of them leverage digital for video consultation in terms of access to health.
Thanks so much. That's really, really comprehensive. And that number of 75% of the decisions about discretionary spending, that's enormous, I must say. Gilles, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's kind of difficult to answer across all segments because we're working obviously just on the low income segment. But I think what Lisa was saying is resonating with me. What I would say, to kind of summarize the concept, I think that to me, it is clear that a gender neutral approach is always going to be biased towards men, right? So it's that's really something that everyone needs to bear in mind. If you take a gender neutral approach, it's going to be biased towards men. And there are, from my perspective, the three areas that we can highlight. One is the technology. I think it can't be said enough. The decision-making process, I don't need to go too far into the details. Lisa gave a few ideas there, and the client centricity. So on the technology side, and sorry if I'm repeating some of these things, but I think that's really crucial that everyone understands that we're at a turning point of digital technology. And so we must really act quickly so this will become, I mean, the fact that women are a bit excluded from the digital segment is becoming more and more of an issue. There's a recent study from the Financial Alliance for Women that found that fintech could increase 70% their revenue if they converted women at the same rate as men. So basically what happens is that in fintech, men are designing the app, they're designing the interface, everything. They don't think of women, and then as part of this, then women get excluded because they stop during the process or whatever. So that's really important to think of the women even at the beginning. Catherine, I think you also mentioned that phone ownership and internet gap. I had a slightly different number, but I think it's kind of really scary that 37% gender gap in sub-Saharan Africa. So women are 37% less likely than men to use the internet in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's quite a huge number, and that's something that that we need to be aware of. The decision-making part, I agree that in our work we found that women are less opportunistic. They want to bounce the idea with friends, with families. Is not necessarily that the husband or the brother is making the decision, but they want to have that discussion before they make the decision. They want to know that the product is for them. They must recognize themselves in the product. That's really important. And the last part, which I think is also crucial, is what I call the client centricity conundrum. And what I mean by that is that the product must, on one side, address some of our personal pain points. I think we mentioned some of them. You know, she's time poor, so she wants to have peace of mind. She wants to have confidentiality. She takes care of herself when she gives birth. So if you have a product that is excluding maternity, you're definitely not going to be helpful. And on the other side, stress factors do not always overlap with the real financial risks. I think Lisa mentioned that in terms of, you know, taking care of the children, what is stressful for her. And that's what I call, or a gender specialist in Switzerland called the verinnerlichten Abwertungsmechanismus. I find it sounds great in German. Basically, it means that women systematically underestimate their book value. So they have this kind of hard-coded understatement in anything they do. So they tend to underestimate their financial contribution. I've been sitting in numbers of focus groups where you ask the woman, is your husband making more money? Or who is making more money? And that's always the husband. And then when you do the math, you see that she's very often making more money than him. So she kind of underestimates her income. She deprioritizes her own health. And this conundrum is about bringing her up to speed about the financial impact of her not being able to deliver to her family, and making that decision that sounds to be selfish on the insurance to say, yes, actually, I need to have something that covers this risk, and it's about me. We had the case in Cambodia where we're speaking to women, and once they understood the product, they said, oh yeah, but that's just too good for me. I don't want to take it. So you really need to go with her in kind of elevating the debate about what her needs are and how it's solving her financial pain points.
Great, thanks. So I think Lisa, you covered extensively, and as did Sarah earlier, about tips for reaching women. So before we come back to that question, in case there's anything else that you'd like to add to it, I'd like to skip to women's risk aversion. So, I mean, conventional wisdom, and I did check this in case it was just a baseless stereotype. So I did check that whether there was actually a body of research to back this. The conventional wisdom is that women are more risk averse than men, which would suggest that they're perfect candidates for insurance, right? And despite this, we know that the access to insurance is much lower. We saw that this morning, and you've mentioned it also in your comments, or various comments made by panelists. And what we also saw this morning is that few insurers are routinely tracking the gender of beneficiaries or policyholders. So isn't this a missed opportunity for insurers and for socioeconomic development?
Yes, so thank you, Katharine. First, I would like to say that from our insights, we see that women are not necessarily risk averse, but rather risk aware, meaning that they take the risk fully conscious about what can happen. So from an insurer point of view, actually, this is what makes them ideal, because you do take a risk with fully knowledge of what can happen. So I think that's also something that we need to take into account, because that very often when we see for women entrepreneurs, the fact that they are typed as a risk averse makes them have less access to finance or to networking. And it's not necessarily that, but more that they have more a balanced rationale when they are launching business or when they are taking protection or education decisions. So I would say that's, I think, the first thing probably to take into account. Second, I think that the message that was given throughout the presentation around how can we collect insights and what the insights can tell us, it's very important, because what we can see is that men and women probably they don't react the same when it comes to insurance purchase. Women, what we see is that they will have key moments in their life when they will have insurance purchase. So having a children, dependency, but also divorce, which is a higher rate in a lot of countries, can make them ideal. So in terms of targeting the different products to meet these life moments in the best way. So it's really about how can we make sure that from the offers, we need to tailor our solutions to meet the different needs that they can have. And I will give an example in divorce, for instance, where both across mature and in emerging markets, we see that women are often the ones taking care of their children. And in countries like in France, for instance, 45% of women will end up in a divorce, which will lead to a reduction of their income of 22% versus 3% for men, so which is huge. And if I take still the example in France, we see that they represent 83% of the single parents. And being single parents, most of the alimonies are not paid, which in AXA France, for instance, it represents more than 11,000 clients. So which is also for us something to acknowledge and to make sure that how through the information from our sales force, it's something that we will address during the discussion. So it's really about the data can take you closer to the client, take you closer to the needs and expectations, and make sure that you will address them properly. So what will be the type of offers, the type of products that you can push. We saw that indeed, I mentioned at the beginning that there were key decision makers in their household, but more importantly, and it's something that Sarah addressed at the beginning, is that expecting to be better protected, they are prepared to pay for this holistic protection. So we saw this figure that women will invest up to 90% of their income on the holistic protection of themselves and their family. So savings, education, and protection, compared to only 40% for men. So it's the women are at this center of an entire ecosystem, and by grasping the opportunity of women as clients, it can only be valuable for our top line growth.
But maybe circling back on the point on the data, Lisa, because I think that's really important also for the audience. I was surprised a bit earlier today to see the percentage of insurance companies participating in the conference, which is really great. I think that's probably the biggest from the last years. I think the point on the data is that many insurance companies don't really know what they could do with the data. And I mean, there are institutions like ICII, or we can help really in putting this kind of strategy around how are you going to use this data. I think the danger is to fall into this trap of saying we don't have data, so we're not looking at that, and kind of having this kind of complacency about we're an equal society, so we should treat everyone the same. It doesn't really we're not really making any difference. And I think that's not about that. That's if you don't know what you have, you can't really look at it. One thing that's very important for insurance companies, look at your claims, because you will know what is the gender when you're paying out claims. You have a way of figuring out what the gender is. One example, and by the way, that's something that a project that we're sharing with ICII in Egypt. We found that during COVID, actually the percentage of hospitalization was dropping by a factor of 4 because women would not go and deliver their children in the hospital. When you bear in mind that nearly something like 65% are actually C-sections in Egypt, this is really something that you can think of. You find that in the data, and you can go back and say, what am I doing about my product? One last word perhaps on the regulators. I really think that's important also, that the regulators and policymakers help the insurance company not be able to say, we don't have this data, so we can't do anything. I really think that there's a fundamental role that policymakers should be addressing.
Yeah, definitely, I agree, Gilles. So and even I think that one key learning, from the I would say like global level, is that we do have these common trends, both in mature, in emerging markets, across the economic ladder. So there is already, even if you don't have full resources to start collecting insights and doing market studies, you can already start from what is public, start from the fact that we do have these key life moments, that there is specific segments when it comes to women, and how through the offers that the insurance companies can have, they can address it. There is also the part on the distribution force, which I think that this is also something important. In some countries, like for instance in France, you cannot do a distinction between men and women on the pricing or like on the communication side. It becomes often very difficult. But what we did is that with our sales force, for instance, we were having women to come, clients with their friends. And instead of talking from a product perspective, we were talking more from a life moment. And so like really spotting what were like the key points that we identified. So dependency being one. In France, women are mainly the caretakers of their parents. And this can lead for them to work part-time, to even quit their job. So it's a really pain point that can be addressed through insurance. And so the idea is really to start the conversation and to put and highlight I would say like the gaps in terms of protection that they can have, and how insurance can be a solution. But indeed, I do think that it's not just a question of if you cannot access, there is nothing that you can do. There is a lot, and even from our side, it was the fact of sharing. So the reports that I mentioned on the impacts of COVID are completely available. So in our website, we did the Shift for Shield, so with the IFC, also with this purpose of sharing and making sure that the more the merrier. So it's really this concept of how can we make sure that we will be addressing the women's market properly with the right products, with the right services, and with the right distribution channel.
Great. So there is actually a question from the audience, which maps very nicely with one of the questions that I was going to ask you. So the question is, how important is a sales force of women to sell to other women? And the question I was going to ask you was, thinking about low-income women in particular, what tips you might be able to share with us of how to reach them, noting that many of them are in the home or working informally in isolated conditions. So over to you for that question. And I would say just quite briefly, because we are nearing our close.
I can give one quick example about the word of mouth. We launched a family product some months ago in Egypt, and we had some research, especially on women who had not received any payment from the previous years on the individual product. And we were amazed to actually see the level of understanding that they had on the product without having actually experienced the claim process. So it means that women are speaking to one another, they're getting the information from various sources, and they collate this information to form a view. And if you can convince her that you have a good value proposition, she will bring this trust, because in insurance, of course, you know, the cash flow is different. You pay for the premium, you hope that claims will be paid for. But that's one example that I would give on this one.
Great. And Lisa?
Yeah, so I think that what we see is that in the markets where we have more women in the distribution force, we have more women clients. So I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but surely it has an effect. But I would say, like, more than that, it's really about how can we make sure that we have the whole distribution force making sure that we correctly address women when they come to an agency. And so on this, I think that it's also about how can we train, so like have gender sensitization trainings, because I think it's important. One feedback that we had at the beginning when we were launching the initiative is that when women come to the agency, we had some agents that will say, okay, go home, talk to your husband and come back and tell me your answer. And definitely it's a no-go when you take into account the insight that women are the decision makers of their household. So indeed, I think it's both on how can we make sure that we have more women on the distribution force to make sure that we have a balance. But let's not forget that men also need to sell to women and understand their pain points.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I remember doing some work some years back in Rwanda on where we ran a number of focus groups with women clients of MFIs and similar, and a number of them said they don't see themselves as banking customers because they find the idea of going to the bank and talking to a man in the suit very, very intimidating. And earlier today, this morning, before I left home, actually, I was thinking about that comment, and I was remembering how when I was a young woman going into the bank, I'd just moved to Switzerland from South Africa, so I was young and pretty naive and not very sure of myself at all. And I remember, you know, going to the bank to meet with the advisor, and I would literally get dressed up to impress the receptionist and the advisor, even though I was the customer. So I think that's something that is incredibly valid for women in lots of different situations, but especially for women perhaps who have less comfort, a lower level of comfort with these formal institutions. So I think we have a couple of other questions in the chat. We'll endeavour to get back to you, Max and Pranav. Although Pranav, I think, is suggesting a link, so thanks for that. And I'd like to hand back to Sarah to do the wrap-up and closing of the session. Thanks all of you for such great insights and the questions that were posted. And I really hope we can move this agenda forward.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think that you seamlessly have used those 20 minutes to help answer some of these more nuanced and in-depth questions around the strategy, and really helping the audience kind of get the bigger picture, and also extra round of thank you to Lisa, to Gilles, to Yinkan. I think that without your examples and your thought leadership and really being able to not only talk the talk, but to be able to walk the talk and to show what different institutions are doing in this space is so vitally important to pressing this agenda forward. I know in Catherine's opening remarks, she really laid the ground for kind of why we're here. And that's because there is still so many gaps to be closed, and that by each and every one of 117 of you, so big applause to being here, to each and every one of the 117 of you that are here today. We really do hope that you walk away with some key messages. One of them, of course, being around, we've beaten it like a drum today, the importance of data and really knowing who is in your portfolio, and using that to make informed business decisions, and really to not wait until someone is coming and asking you how many women are in your portfolio, but really to start proactively gathering that information and seeing what insights can be drawn from it. The second being the importance around, everything in addition to what you're actually selling. It's not just about creating a solution for women and having that let it do its own work, but rather really thinking about the partnerships, thinking about the different approaches, thinking about the sales channels. I know these last questions were around the women and if they're an integral part of the sales force. Absolutely, yes. And then of course, being able to have this women's approach be within a broader institutional strategy, and the importance of having it be embedded within your institution's DNA in terms of, we have Gilles and Lisa here who are great leaders at their institutions and really are pressing this agenda forward. Oyinkan, who is really the steward within AXA Mansard for the women's insurance program, but she wouldn't be able to do it if she didn't have support from senior leadership. So we hope that regardless of where within your institution you sit, whether you're a consultant, whether you are, an executive leader at an insurance company or an insurtech, that today's conversation really did get you thinking about how you're currently serving women customers. Because if you're not proactively and intentionally thinking about how you are serving women customers, you might be unintentionally excluding them. So we leave you with those closing remarks. And I see Faye writing in the chat, women are the future. Thank you. Thank you for that. But also, women may be the future, but we do require, 100% participation. So women, men, all genders, please continue to press this agenda forward. And we hope that this session really does kick you off to be thinking about women and how we need to better target women customers throughout all of the future conference sessions, and of course in your day-to-day work. So big thank you to all the attendees. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Gilles. Thank you, Yinka. And thank you, Catherine. And thank you to the Microinsurance Network and the Munich Re Foundation for allowing us this opportunity. So wish everyone an excellent rest of your day, excellent rest of the conference, and we'll be seeing you virtually and hopefully in person soon. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
you, Sarah. Thank you, Catherine. Thanks to all the panelists. And that is the last session of today. We have a replay later of the first session. There was one question in the chat, how many of the participants here are women? I can't say about this particular session, but I can tell you that of the 1,350 participants who have registered for the conference, 600 are women, or at least they said they clicked on Mrs. So that's what I can say. It's not 50%, but it's very high up. So I think that's a promise. So thank you very much for that interesting session. I would have many more questions, and I would be particularly interested in going more into details in particular products and to see how we can develop products that are really meeting women's needs, and to walk through the supply chain and see where can be done what and where were the lessons learned. But that tells us we need more sessions like this, and we will certainly integrate that topic again. It's the first time we had it done this year in the next conference. So thanks everyone, and take care.